Okay, so I did something monumentally stupid. I know I did. I've always prided myself on my ability to analyze, to find the root cause of a problem, but this time, I diagnosed the ailment and then killed the patient out of sheer intellectual arrogance. And the worst part is, I can't even pinpoint the exact moment my brain decided to short circuit. It wasn't a screaming match, there was no thrown porcelain. Rory and I had what you might call the perfect breakup. Civil, respectful, almost gentle. We ended a 3-year relationship over lukewarm lattes with a handshake and a shared, watery smile. Then, less than 24 hours later, I emailed him a 6-page, single-spaced document I'd titled, "Some Overdue Reflections for Our Mutual Growth." It sounds so clinical, so pretentious now, doesn't it? But at the time, in the sterile glow of my laptop screen at 2 a.m., it felt like the most rational thing in the world. It wasn't an angry rant, you have to believe me. In my mind, I was providing a service, a gift. I was an emotional archaeologist, carefully dusting off artifacts of our shared history to understand why the temple crumbled. Now there's just silence. A complete and total radio silence that has me checking my phone every 30 seconds, my email inbox a barren wasteland. It's a silence so loud, so absolute, it's starting to feel like a verdict. The breakup itself was a masterclass in maturity, or so I told myself. We met at our place, a little cafe with perpetually sticky tables and surprisingly good almond scones. The air between us wasn't charged with anger. It was heavy with a quiet, shared sadness that felt almost professional. We'd been drifting for months, 2 ships passing in the night in our own 2-bedroom apartment. The intimacy had faded into a comfortable, almost sibling-like routine of divvying up bills and deciding whose turn it was to buy milk. We both knew it. We talked it through like 2 project managers discussing a venture that had run its course, laying out the data points of our incompatibility on the table between us. "I think we want different things, Aloan," he said, his voice impressively steady. His eyes were fixed on the swirling foam of his coffee as if it held the answers. "I'm thinking about a mortgage, a dog, a life that stays in one place." I nodded, feeling a strange surge of pride in our calm, analytical approach. "And I'm looking at that promotion in the London office," I offered, my own voice a perfect mirror of his composure. Our timelines are just misaligned. There were no tears, no raised voices, just a mutual acknowledgement of the inevitable. I remember looking at him, this man I had loved, and feeling a detached admiration for how well we were performing this final act. We were being adults. We were winning at breaking up. As we were about to leave, scraping our chairs against the worn linoleum, he put his hand over mine on the sticky tabletop. It was the first time we'd touched in weeks, and the warmth of his skin was a jolt. "Listen, Elle," he said, and his voice was different now. The carefully constructed boardroom tone was gone, replaced by an earnestness that almost broke the sterile atmosphere we'd built. "Thank you for everything. The last 3 years, they were important. They meant something to me. I just want us to be able to look back on this and not have it be ugly. Let's promise to respect what we had, okay? No drama, no post-game analysis." I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "Of course, Rory, respect. That's the most important thing." He squeezed my hand once, a quick, final pressure, and then let go. We walked out, gave each other a brief, awkward hug on the corner under a flickering street lamp, and went our separate ways. I genuinely thought we'd handled it perfectly. I saw his words as a closing statement, a nice sentiment, the kind of thing people say. I didn't realize until it was far too late that it wasn't a statement. It was a plea. He was drawing a line in the sand, a fragile boundary around the memory of us, and I, in my quest for closure, was about to bring in a bulldozer. That night, alone in the apartment that was suddenly, cavernously mine, the self-congratulatory calm began to curdle. The silence was deafening. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum from the refrigerator, seemed to mock the neat, tidy box I'd tried to put our breakup in. A nagging sense of incompletion began to worm its way into my thoughts. The conversation at the cafe felt too clean, too polite, like a press release drafted by lawyers. It was like reading the summary on the back of a book instead of the book itself. We had identified the what, that we were breaking up, but we hadn't properly dissected the why. Not really. Not in the granular, exhaustive, almost pathological detail that my brain craves. My core flaw, the one I dress up as a strength, is a deep-seated belief that I can think my way out of any feeling. I see emotions as messy data points that need to be organized, categorized, and filed away into a coherent narrative. And our narrative felt unfinished, full of plot holes only I could see. Rory's plea to respect what we had started to sound, in the echo chamber of my apartment, like an avoidance tactic. A way to escape true accountability. He didn't want a post-game analysis. Well, why not? Was he afraid of what a real, honest audit would reveal about his own shortcomings? The thought was intoxicating, a spark of purpose in the void. Fueled by a second glass of wine and this burgeoning cognitive arrogance, I sat down at my desk. I told myself this wasn't an attack. It was an act of profound generosity. It was a final act of collaborative growth, a roadmap for his future relationships so he wouldn't make the same mistakes. I opened a blank document, the cursor blinking expectantly like a tiny, digital accomplice. And then it started. A trickle at first, then a flood. I began to meticulously document every single slight, every minor grievance, every forgotten promise from the past 3 years. It started with the small things. The way he'd always leave his wet towel on the bed. A classic, Exhibit A, the time he forgot to record the finale of that show I loved, which I framed as a fundamental lack of respect for my interests. But as I typed, the scope widened, the accusations growing more severe, more psychoanalytical. I brought up the Christmas of 2021 when he'd called my new, very expensive haircut brave. I didn't just mention the comment. I dedicated a full paragraph to deconstructing it as a passive-aggressive jab at my self-esteem, linking it to his own insecurities. I analyzed, with the precision of a prosecuting attorney, a conversation from 2 years ago where his enthusiasm for my career change felt, in retrospect, performative and laced with an undercurrent of resentment. I even included a line item about how he always, without fail, chose the worst, most crowded grocery store checkout line, presenting it as a damning metaphor for his inability to make efficient life choices. Each memory, filtered through my current lens of intellectual superiority, became another piece of evidence. I wasn't just listing complaints, I was building a case. I was crafting a thesis on the systemic failures of our relationship, complete with footnotes and a concluding summary. It was my magnum opus of resentment, disguised as rational thought. And as the page count grew, so did my conviction that I was doing something necessary and brave. By 3 a.m., the document was complete. 6 pages of meticulously cataloged failures. I reread it, a grim sense of satisfaction washing over me. It felt definitive. It was a perfect, logical explanation for the ache in my chest. I wasn't just sad, I was vindicated. I attached the file to a new email, the subject line already typed out. For a brief second, a flicker of doubt. I remembered his face in the cafe, the earnest plea in his voice. Let's not make it ugly. But my intellectual pride quickly extinguished it. This wasn't ugly, this was truth. This was clarity. He was a man who valued principles. Surely he would appreciate the principle of radical honesty. I hovered my mouse over the send button. It felt like a moment of immense power, the final word in a 3-year conversation. I clicked it. The email vanished from my outbox with a faint whoosh sound. A wave of relief, clean and sharp, washed over me. I had done it. I had closed the loop. I went to bed expecting to wake up to a response. A long, thoughtful one, probably. Maybe he'd be defensive at first, but then he'd see the irrefutable logic of my points. He would concede. He might even thank me for my honesty. We would have that final, deep conversation I craved, and then we could truly, cleanly move on. The next morning, nothing. I checked my phone before my eyes were fully open. No email. No text. I told myself he needed time to process. It was a lot to take in, after all. By lunchtime, the silence started to feel less like contemplation and more like a void. I sent a casual text. Hey, just wanted to make sure you got my email. Hope you're doing okay? The message delivered. It was never read. One blue tick, suspended in an eternity of digital purgatory. The first real prickle of anxiety started to crawl up my spine. This wasn't part of the script I'd written in my head. He was supposed to engage, to argue, to do something. But there was just nothing. An absolute, impenetrable wall of silence. By day 3, the anxiety had morphed into a low-grade, simmering panic. Every notification on my phone sent a jolt of false hope through me, followed by the crushing disappointment of it being a work email or a promotional text. His silence was no longer passive. It felt active, deliberate, a conscious choice. It was a weapon, and it was devastatingly effective. I couldn't focus at work. I kept rereading my own email, my masterpiece of logic, searching for the flaw. At first, I found none, still cloaked in my self-righteousness. Then, slowly, certain phrases started to sound harsher than I'd intended. The paragraph about the grocery store lines suddenly seemed petty, almost cruel. The psychoanalysis of his comment about my haircut read less like insightful critique and more like a vindictive character assassination. Finally, on the fourth night of absolute silence, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Jess, our mutual friend, the one who had introduced us at a trivia night years ago. I carefully constructed my opening, framing it as gentle concern. "Hey, have you heard from Rory? I'm a little worried. He's gone completely dark on me. We had a really good, amicable split, but I sent him a follow-up email just to sort of process things, and now nothing. It's just not like him." I tried to make the email sound like a simple, logistical thing, like forwarding mail or figuring out who gets the good coffee maker. Jess was quiet on the other end of the line for a long time. So long, in fact, that I thought the call had dropped. "Elowen," she finally said, and her voice was heavy with a disappointment that hit me harder than any anger could have. It was the voice of someone who expected better from me. What exactly was in that email? I gave her the sanitized version, the corporate-speak version of my emotional rampage. I focused on my desire for clarity, closure, and mutual growth. I could practically hear her shaking her head through the phone. "Oh, Elle, why would you do that?" "Why? I just thought we needed to be honest," I said, my voice rising, defensive. The carefully constructed calm was cracking. It was a rational breakdown of the issues. He's the one being immature by ignoring it. He can't just run away from a conversation. "Immature," Jess's voice sharpened, losing its gentle disappointment and gaining a hard edge. "Elowen, do you have any idea what you did? Rory's one defining principle, the thing we all know about him, is avoiding needless drama. He hates it. He thinks it's the ugliest part of human nature. The one thing he wanted was to end things with dignity. He told me that himself the other day." My stomach dropped, a cold, heavy stone. He talked to you?" "Yes," she said, and her next words were the ones that shattered my entire self-constructed reality. "He called me right after you two left the cafe. He was sad, obviously, but he sounded relieved, almost proud. He said, and I quote, 'It hurts like hell, Jess, but at least we did it right. At least we can remember the good stuff without it all being ruined at the end.' You didn't just send him an email, Elowen. You found that one thing he was holding onto, that one small comfort in all this pain, and you took a sledgehammer to it. You didn't give him clarity. You gave him proof that his worst fears about breakups were true." Jess's words echoed in the suffocating silence of my apartment long after we hung up. It wasn't an accusation, it was a diagnosis. And it was brutally, horrifyingly accurate. The entire foundation of my self-righteousness crumbled in an instant, leaving me exposed and ashamed in the wreckage. My emotional autopsy wasn't a gift of clarity. It was a selfish, egotistical monologue designed to inflict one final, intellectual wound. It was me, refusing to let him leave the stage without hearing my devastating critique of his performance. I hadn't been seeking mutual growth, I had been seeking a win. I wanted him to concede that the failure of our relationship was, logically and systematically, his fault. I wanted his signature on my report. The dam of my carefully constructed composure broke. The numbness was replaced by a hot, sickening shame. I did what I promised myself I wouldn't do and opened his social media page, a place I'd avoided. His profile was gone. Not private, not unfriended, gone. A search for his name yielded nothing, just a user not found error that felt like a digital slap in the face. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tried WhatsApp. My messages, once marked with 2 blue ticks, now only showed one single, lonely gray tick. Blocked. I went through my phone contacts, my email, every digital tether that had ever connected us. Severed. It was a systematic, silent, and utterly complete erasure. He hadn't just ghosted me. He had performed a digital amputation, cutting me out of his life with the clean, quiet precision of a surgeon. The man who hated drama had chosen the least dramatic, most final way to ensure he would never, ever have to hear from me again. Now, I'm trapped in a prison of my own making, the warden and the sole inmate. I sit in front of my laptop for hours, the offending document open on the screen like a testament to my own monstrosity. I read a sentence, and a wave of nausea hits me as I see the cruelty in it, the sheer, unnecessary meanness. Your perpetual optimism isn't a virtue. It's a cognitive refusal to engage with reality. Who writes that to someone they once loved? Who takes a quality you once admired and reframes it as a pathological flaw? Then, a moment later, a twisted part of my brain, the arrogant, analytical part that got me into this mess, pipes up in self-defense. But it's true, isn't it? He did have a tendency to ignore problems. I find myself nodding, agreeing with the ghost of my own logic, before another wave of gut-wrenching shame crashes over me. I'm arguing with myself, defending the indefensible, reliving the crime over and over. I've started writing apologies, dozens of them. Some are pleading and pathetic, some are logical and try to explain my flawed reasoning, some are just the word sorry copied and pasted 1,000 times. But they all remain in my drafts folder, unsent, because I finally understand. The silence isn't a request for an explanation or an apology. It's the answer. There's no one left to send them to. He's gone. And I'm left here, alone, with nothing but the perfect, unassailable logic of my own cruelty.